um, organize ourselves in such a way to be positioned to respond to that, and that whatever happens with that initiative, that is still the sort of fundamental question of how we think about responding on a global level. My husband Hakeem Al-Abudi has often said that there's nothing that is produced that people regularly buy or use in the world that is produced by people of African descent or anywhere on the continent. Now, whether that's both a political question and economic question, it is also fundamentally an educational question. I think that I worked at Northwestern University and research universities like Northwestern. One of the things that nobody had ever had any kind of conversation can be other than word, but the vast majority of faculty are Jewish. That's not an accident, I think, because the Jewish community is positioned itself to say that if we're going as a minority in this country who are a target for stigmatization, that we have to organize ourselves in terms of the kinds of professions for which we prepare ourselves. And I think that in this new civil rights movement for the education for children of African descent, we need to target certain professions such as medicine, such as law, such as communication, such as education, such as agriculture, engineering, and the sciences. What is happening today in the world in terms of AIDS and the continent, which is almost like a new sort of genocide in terms of thinking about those numbers. How are we positioned in terms of a knowledge base in these fundamental fields to respond to that question, I think is part of what we have to address. I also think that there's important economic implications to how these questions that we're thinking about that have to do with one of the major results of the Brown decision was this economic divide, so that you have this tremendous rise in an upwardly mobile black middle class who fundamentally moved out of mixed income black neighborhoods into integrate either into suburban neighborhoods or but fundamentally ended up leaving a neighborhood, certainly in terms of a place like Chicago, where you have this extreme, a new kind of segregation in the black community, which I think is in part, this economic segregation. And so I think that in order to address the reorganization of these schools, we also need economic policies in relationship to mixed income housing, job development inside black neighborhoods, mental health services, such that there's a vibrant community in which schools can grow and develop. The historical black schools that we, people like Vanessa Sidney Walker talk about as being fundamentally situated in communities were places where you had a wide variety of black people with a set of self-interest for which the schools served as a major point of departure. I guess I want to close with a couple of recommendations and just a brief statement about what we've been doing in Chicago as I think one example of what can be done. I have been every place that I go suggesting that one very simple, not simple, but one concrete action that we could begin to take, and perhaps the National Urban League could be a part of that, is to establish a national rites of passage program. A national rites of passage program such that in every single neighborhood there would be an organized body of conscious adults who assume the responsibility for the socialization and the skill development of all the young people from, from preschool at least through 16, 17, or 18 years old. Because of the complexity of the struggle that we face, we have to fight on multiple stages simultaneously. So while we struggle to transform public schools, where most of our children are, we cannot leave it to the fact to say that if our schools are in places where you have majority black teachers who are predominantly young, who are often very threatened working in those schools, which is the dominant mode in terms of the teaching force across the country today. And that's another actually result of Brown. Ironically, Brown actually in some sense initiated almost a decline in terms of black teachers, certain positions of black teachers in schools at the time. And then while new opportunities arose, so we had fewer people blacks going into teaching because they have many more opportunities now. You're now at the point where you have blacks coming into teaching almost really as a minority. So that in these public schools, so while we're wrestling with the public schools, there needs to be a concrete body of adults who can say, this kid is having a problem with reading, so we're going to take him into the church on Saturdays and after school to make sure he reads while we're struggling to get teachers in the classroom who in fact can teach him. In the absence of this kind of thing, problems that we're facing are just going to continue to grow. I think it's one concrete way in which we can begin to take responsibility and have enough organizations, both locally and nationally, to do this kind of work. Then finally, very briefly, in terms of the work we've been doing in Chicago, we have two schools in Chicago. New Concept School, which is an independent African-centered school, which was founded in 1972 and is still in operation. We also now have an elementary charter school, the Shabazz International Charter School. We're educating on a daily basis somewhere between 350, 375 children. We're also in the process of working to open a high school at the old DuSable High School building, for those of you who may know in terms of Chicago. Over these 30 years, in terms of this work that we've done with an African-centered educational system of which we are a part, an independent system, the young people who have come out over these last 30 years, so we've got engineers, anthropologists, mathematicians, physicists, communication specialists, journalists, filmmakers, people in real estate, computer scientists, all of whom are African in their consciousness, who are very, very clear that the knowledge that they develop is not only for their own benefit in terms of getting quote-unquote jobs, but to be able to build themselves, to build businesses, to generate new knowledge, to contribute to the growth and development of the African community. They're very, very clear about that. One small example of with our own son, some years ago, you may remember when Sankofa film came out, and there was no distribution systems for it. So in a lot of the different cities, people were bringing the film. We brought it to Chicago, and we were wrestling to find a place to show the film, and the white people didn't want to touch it. And our son at the time, who was about 11, 12 years old, looked at us in great astonishment and said, well, the problem is you don't have your own theater. He said, if you had your own theater, then you wouldn't have to go through all of this. So that was just a very small example of the way in which a consistent, comprehensive, African-centered framework for educating our children can produce young people who will be, in fact, the new leaders of which we want to depend. And I think that kind of concrete action, having African-centered rites of passage that is the complement to whatever's going in the school while we're simultaneously struggling to transform those schools, is the response to the policy question.
Hey, Ron, are we taking this wisdom? We need to be taking this wisdom, shouldn't we? This has been excellent. Give both of our first two panelists a big round of applause for a lot of wisdom. Let me now go to Reverend Willie.
Point of order, is she not going to comment on the Cosby?
She said that her suggestion that we create a rites of passage initiative or program.
I don't want to get into an argument with Bill Cosby. I don't want to get in public, whatever, all of that. What we have learned in terms of the work that we've been doing in Chicago for the last really 35 years is that you respond by action. You respond by action. And the action I'm saying is if in every neighborhood, in every city, in every church, there is a program, and you can say that the boundary of this neighborhood is this, and there's 200 young people in here, and we know who they are, and we have touched their lives, all this stuff will become moot.
Thank you. Thank you. Reverend Willie Wilson.
Yeah. Let me say good afternoon to everyone, and give honor to God for the blessed privilege which is mine to be here with this distinguished group of persons in this panel today. Let me start by saying, I think that notwithstanding the good intent of those who crafted the argument for the Supreme Court decision of 1954, that notwithstanding, I think the 1954 decision, not the decision itself, but the interpretation of that decision, is one of the worst things that has happened to us since we've been in the United States of America. I say that because it issued in what I call a total cultural historical surrender. When you talk about the decision itself, for those who have not read or studied that decision, it was the language of the decision was quite racist, because a term was coined out of the decision that said, inherently inferior. And there's no difference between saying something is inherently inferior and saying it is genetically inferior, which is the base for much of the racism that exists in this country today. And of course, we know that with the levels of value for human beings, we have always been at the bottom. Negritude has always been that which is the lowest of the lowest. And so when we start talking about what happened, the argument was based on, if you allow me to do this, it's a bad thing to let a preacher who's been on vacation for 3 weeks have a microphone. But when you talk about that decision, it was based on those who know dolls, black dolls, or rather brown dolls, white dolls, and other colored dolls. In both instances, in the North and the South, the majority of black children in America, when asked which is the doll that you would like to be like, or which is the best doll, selected a brown doll or a doll of color. The Clarks, who were the psychologists who worked on that case, determined that the reason that the blacks, majority in the South, had selected a black or colored doll was because they had been exposed to so much segregation that they couldn't think right. That those in the North selected the colored doll or brown doll equally because they had not been exposed to as much racism as those in the South. And thus then the term was coined inherently inferior, which, as has been stated earlier, although basically designed to deal with education, moved into every aspect of life in America. And we determined as a people, we could not continually argue to the oppressor that segregation was inherently, made us inherently inferior, and the actual wordage was, it is unhealthy for colored children to go to school with colored children. It is healthy for colored children to go to school with white children. Continually saying that, we could not help but have that ingrained in our own mentalities. And so a mindset was developed so that pre-1954, if you deal with statistical data, you will see on the one that before 1954 there were less than 100,000 black men in prisons in the United States of America. Before 1954, wherever you lived in America, in the black community, you could leave your door open at night and not worry about anybody coming in. Anywhere in America, there was very little crime. People were so ashamed of a family member going away to jail. When they went to jail, they would say they gone away to the farm. They'll be back in a little while. We gave away by that time. By 1954, we had over 100 banks. That number is now dwindled to single digits. Before 1954, we had over 100 hospitals. It had dwindled to single digits. Before 1954, we had our hospitals, we had our banks, we had our own hotels, we had our own businesses, we had our enclave, we had our captured community, which speaks very much to why that was the case. We had no other joy, but nonetheless, there was a sense of commitment to our own. When we talk about the school system, I grew up in a segregated school in Virginia. It wasn't any was anything unhealthy about going to school with all black children. In fact, it was quite healthy. The reason it was healthy because those systems at that point in history gave what is so particularly important to develop a sense of historical continuity. When you're going through a struggle for survival as we have in this country from the time we got have here even unto now, there must be someone who can speak to a sense of historical continuity, who can say eons and eons ago, we have gone through this and this is what we have done. There must be some coping mechanisms. And so we had teachers. Wasn't anything wrong with the schools. The problem was we got the textbooks that were used up by the white community, and sometimes with pages missing and chapters missing, and even at that, we still learn. We got the chalk that had been used up down to a nub that was put back in the sawdust box. And then the teacher had to put an extender in it so it would be enough to write on the board, but we still learn because we got 3 educations. The first education was that boy, girl, you can learn anything. The second education was a legacy of competence, because we were taught about George Washington Carver, Booker T. Washington, and all the greats of our culture and our history, which gave us a sense of identity, which said to you, you too can achieve because you have a legacy of competence. And thirdly, that was a third education. This whole education today about getting a job so you can make some money and get a degree, that's a new thing for us. The third education was go to school and learn something so that you can come back and help your people and be committed to doing something to change the conditions around you. There were certain ontological phenomena that we brought with us from Africa that we maintained even through slavery, pre-1954. Like respect for your elders. Yes. You could not go into a room where there was some old folks talking even. Boy, get up, get out of here. You hear the old folks talking, move out of this room. Spirituality. The sense that for the African, what is first is spirit. And anybody talking about Africa, they ain't talking about God, they ain't talking about Africa. And in that sense, then, all of us were taught. I know we used to try to take a break and not go to school, or rather go to church. And wait till time in school, church was almost over and didn't want to go out somewhere. Our mother would say, if you didn't want to go to church, you can't go anywhere. No matter where you were growing up in America, in Alabama, or Mississippi, or Georgia, or Virginia. And you would think that there were textbooks teaching this. Because it's an elemental psychological principle that was being taught. Don't lie.
That's right.
Because if you lie, you steal. And if you steal, you kill. Elemental psychological judgment principle. If you start telling lies, you no longer know the difference between right and wrong, and good and bad. And indeed, you will lie. And if you lie, you will steal or you will kill. I was in Ghana a couple of weeks ago, and I was reading a story on the front page of the Ghanaian paper. I was telling a story as we want to do in our culture. And the story was about a man who was accosted by the devil. And the devil told him, said, look, there are 3 things that you can do. I want you to either kill somebody, I want you to steal something, or I want you to start drinking and become alcohol. The man wanted to steal, but he was afraid of the repercussions. He didn't want to kill anybody, so he opted for drinking. And guess what? He became an alcoholic, and he ended up stealing, and he ended up killing somebody because he lost the sense of value judgment. And he could no longer tell what was right and wrong, what was good or bad. And so we lost all of that. And so, and as well what we lost, and this, let me get on this just for a moment, I'll be through. When you talk about Bill Cosby, I think Bill Cosby's comments, notwithstanding all his philanthropic activity, was very imbalanced. And if he were a white man, I would call him a racist. It was very classist. The reason it was classist is because what we have developed in this country, I think Louis Gates speaks of it in his latest book. When you start talking about what he did was isolated the majority of our population. The majority of our people still live in poverty. The majority of our people, 40%, live below the poverty line, another 40% just on the board. 40% of our men basically unemployed. The educational system, as we know it, in terms of what has happened since that period from 1954 to now, leaves our young people not to speak of what has happened in breakdowns pre-1954 as well. As late as 1960, 80% of our households had a man in the house. I don't have to get into all of that in terms of what happened with the welfare programs, and Dr. Height told you a beautiful story about that as she worked as a social worker in New York some years ago. And having to go into homes and women having to hide their husbands in the closet and under the bed and send them down the street lest they not get that check. And we look at all of these things that have happened, but the question is, What about the middle class?
Yeah.
What about those who have, and what 1954 did was allow some of us to forget the rest of us. And not remember that. I heard Bill make this statement at least 3 times. I heard it at Dr. Hite's banquet when they paid off the bills for the building there on Pennsylvania Avenue. I heard it again in Constitution Hall when he had some of the former Supreme Court justices who live and their family members who are now living there present. He made the statement as if, he said, they passed 1954 as if that was a cure-all. But look at what we have done. Then he went on to talk about mothers who buy their children $150 sneakers. Of course, that may not be the best thing to do, but many of these mothers do care about their children. And they may not be able to buy what Bill Cosby can buy for his children. But they do the best they can based upon what they have not received, as my dear mother just said a few moments ago, in terms of what has been taught to these people and not been taught to them. And when you talk about, he was talking about how when he grew up, if a child got pregnant, they sent it down south. Then a week or 2 before the birth of the child, the mother would go down as if she had the baby and come back 2 weeks later with the baby. Same difference. Whether you go down south or not, she still had a baby. And the point of the matter is, we have many problems in our community that we need to address. And we need to address the middle class, we need to address the lower class, we need to address all of the classes. And we need to come together in a way that speaks to how can we make a difference? How can we instill the kind of values, the kinds of things that were carried through pre-1954, which we have lost, which we need to recover, becomes the great challenge that is before us. I think there are many ways that we can look at the solutions to this. One of the things that we've done here in Temple and Washington, D.C., we built a rice and pastor's house in Ghana, in West Africa. We've had it there since 1992, and we take our young people for their final right of crossover into manhood and womanhood to another country every year. Various the boys and the girls. This year, I just got back from Ghana. It was the girls' year. But one of the great difficulties, let me just say this one final thing. This great divide which has occurred, which is getting wider and wider even as I speak, so that there's a level of classism vastly and rapidly rising in the African American community. And I have to say, as a pastor, that one of the main culprits in this whole phenomena is the black church, or the lack of a black church. Because in fact, if we talk about that one institution that historically has been most on the forefront in addressing the peculiar particular problems and needs of our people, it has been the black church. But what has happened over the last 20 years or so, one, this whole nouveau prosperity theology movement, which is teaching many of our people that if you have something, you got the right relationship with God. And those who don't have anything don't have the right relationship with God, so don't be bothered with them. Has created a chasm that is growing and widening. Added to that, this whole flow of many of our people now joining, and let me just say this clearly, joining white churches. And the point of this is this: the white church historically has never addressed the peculiar needs and problems and concerns of black people. In fact, it's been on the other end of the spectrum, condoning and sanctioning racism, slavery, and white supremacy. Not only that, but many of our black preachers, because they got 1 or 2 white members, deciding that it's a fearful thing to say anything about race or about the problems that are affecting our people as a community. And when you add all that together with the new move towards suburban mega church that's out in the middle of nowhere, that has no connection with nothing, so that our people have no sense of connection with that which has been the center of all activity in our history as a people in this country, we have a good picture of why things are the way they are, particularly in regards to the education. The church again has been a major vehicle we know the first schools. Many of our HBCs came out of the black church. And it's in that sense that we have to recover certain of those ways of doing things, African ways of doing things, and not be ashamed of it. Because the only reason we're here today, we have to ask ourselves the question, there ain't no reason that not one of us in this room should be sitting up in here. And the only reason we're here is because of the indomitable spirit and a belief in a power that was greater than us that brought us to this present point.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to ask Sandra Garrett Beasley, and as when she completes, we're going to invite you to go to the mic when she's finished and offer a thought or a question to any one of the panelists. Sandra Garrett Beasley.
My name is Sandra.
I'm
That's
sorry.
okay. My teacher couldn't spell.
Pronounce it.
My teacher couldn't spell, and she taught me to spell it that way. And then when my daddy realized that it was too late, I couldn't remember the correct way. Let me give all praise to my Heavenly Father and thank Him for allowing me to look out and see all of these beautiful faces. And as Ron Daniels knows, I say whatever comes to my mind. I'm so proud this year as I pass you in the hall. If I have a badge, we speak to one another. I was coming here and I was real tired, and I stopped to catch a rail, and one of our brothers stopped, which was like a miracle, and said, "Can you make it or can I help you?" You want to know the solution to everything? It's us helping us. But more than that, it's us loving us. The Brown versus Topeka, yes, it destroyed public education for African American children. Yes, my sisters pointed out, so I'm not going to deal with what you all said. It's done wonderful things. And it's partly the reason we're sitting on this ship today too, because it opened doors. Doors I don't understand that need to be opened because the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment made me a citizen. And I'm supposed to have the same rights and privileges as anybody else. But I know I don't. Not only that, I'm not just an African, I'm of African descent. I'm a descendant of every race of people they have. I'm a Heinz 57, just like you are. I built this nation, or rather my people built this nation. This nation built me. While they were trying to hurt Africans, they built a stronger race of people than they ever expected. I'm a ghetto lady. I wasn't born in the ghetto. I thought I was rich. But I found out when I moved to Kansas City and started teaching, I certainly wasn't rich. So that's why I said, yes, I got degrees to get money, but I love teaching. We are hurting our children by not doing some of the things these ladies are saying. I'm retired. My son is a neurologist. Our son is a neurologist and an internist. And I called him once and I said, baby, I just got some money and several $1,000s and I want to put it in a, he said, hold it. I'm secure. My brother's secure. Why don't you move out of the ghetto? We don't want that shack. That's not a shack. I sit on my porch, my one biggest sin, and I smoke. Because I don't want to smoke in my house anymore. But I work with those children that run up and down the street, whose parents step out on the porch and say, hey, you little MF, come here. I work with that parent when I tell her neighbor, could you talk to her and then I'll talk to her. I don't live in the ghetto. I live in a community that one day we're all going to be proud of, because if we don't bring them, we're not going anywhere. Those of us who, not me, but those of you all who have a little money, don't get too excited. They showed you they'll close the bank, shut down the stock market, and you won't have a dime. And the only thing is we don't kill ourselves, we just get hungry. My babies come to school not liking themselves. That's the first answer to what we do. I don't tell children you're ugly. I don't tell children your hair is nappy. I just got back from camp, church camp, and I wore a hat because I don't like to do hair. I mean, he was combing. And the little boy said, you got on a hat because your hair is nappy. And the teacher started laughing. They said, no, she has. I said, she has what y'all call good hair. But if it was so good, I'd wake up in the morning and it would already be fixed. Because I want him to know there is no such thing as good and bad in our race. It's whatever the Lord gave you. He knew what to give me, he knew what to give you. He didn't tell you on my introduction, I said, I am a child of a king. Reverend, don't start church anymore, because see, I'll start shouting. I'm also the daughter of a minister. When the young lady was doing her monologue, I couldn't help but cry. My sister gave me a Kleenex. I get very upset. Not only are teachers a part of the problem, we're all part of the problem. When we don't reach out and let our people know, this is, what year is it? I'm retired. 2004. No dates, no nothing. 2004. And we still got people feeling bad about the color of their skin, about the kink in their hair. We got people disliking one another because of the color that person is. We have a job, people, and the first job is to feel good about yourself. Feel good about yourself. I gained 100 pounds, was very depressed, very dysfunctional for years. And somebody said, hey, look what you're doing for other people. And you always clean, love to smell good. And I just began to wake up and say, now, I've been ill. What does this 100 pounds have to do with what I got to do? God said, go forth and do his work. We've got to make one another feel good about themselves. And especially on this color thing, hair thing, size thing. See, William Lynch told you, I'll fix it where they'll be enslaved forever. That's right. You removed the shackles from our physical body, but you left the shackles on my mind. That's right. When Brown versus Topeka passed, the man, and not all men, please, I'm not, well, sort of, I'm married to Joe Beasley, so sort of, I'm not a racist, but I'm a realist. There's some good white folks, if they weren't, we wouldn't be where we are today. But there's some other folks, black and white, that were up late at night trying to figure out versus Topeka work in our favor. And what better way than to cripple our youth educationally? You can't teach children to read if they don't like themselves. And then you teach them to read, but that's calling words and understanding what they read. They have to be able to think through what they read. Then they can write it, because they got something to write. And the last thing they got to do is to be able to stand up and verbalize. You can do that and not even be in the classroom. What has happened is now we have all these, as you mentioned, white folks coming in to teach, because my people, like I told my son, and I'm sorry I did that, no baby, don't teach school. Go where you can make some money. You never have to ask me for a dime. and you know, but that was wrong because he might have been good with children. So I'm glad he didn't ask for the dime. But these people are coming in and crippling your children, my children. When Robert Earl, my baby twin, was, I think, in the 7th grade, they called us up, the counselor, to say that he needed to be in special ed. Special ed? He reads everything his daddy writes and tells me what it says. What kind of special ed? I wish I could go to that counselor today and tell him what he's doing. We allow people to tell us our children are special ed. If I was a student today, I'd be in behavioral disorder because I would say and do what I want to. And if you're boring, and that's what's happening. I was observing in a classroom one day, an older white woman had come back to teach after 99 years, and she was on stage of my show. And as I sat there, a little boy said, "Miss Daisy." I said, "Yes, baby." "You're gonna fall on the floor. Because your head is bobbing." She was reading The Grapes of Wrath to a 9th grade class. And later, baby said, "I understand how you felt, Miss Daisy, because we all go to sleep at night. You have a right to go up there and make sure teaching is going on. Somebody's got to do it. And if you don't save these children, hey, they gone, because I'm retired. No mistake." And then back down to Bill Cosby, and I'm trying to make my 5 minutes close. Am I close? Okay. Oh, no, you didn't. The good reference. Bill Cosby. And I thank you for so. Just put it where I wish that was taped so I could give it to my brother. This man has done a lot for our community. And he's just human. And he said what he felt. I didn't hear him. But you know what? He called a lot of y'all to go to thank him. A lot of you. My neighbor called. I'm the neighborhood everything. You need a power of attorney type, call me, I'll do it. So they called me and they said, "Miss Beasley, this lady works at the hospital." And she said, "Last night we were discussing what Bill Cosby said. I didn't tell her, I didn't even hear it." And I stayed it. And I went on to explain to her. Every time one of you all, one of us, gets a little money, what happens? The media goes to work. And that's what I said about Bill Cosby. Maybe what he said was not appropriate for the place, but it sure made a lot of people start thinking. Because this woman said, "You know, I wouldn't buy my child any $150 tennis shoes." I said, "I hope not." That's what grandparents do. But seriously, you need to take what he said and use it to get other people to think. You all from all over the United States of America. Let's make people think. Instead of always criticizing, which is what we do best, let's go back to loving one another. Back when we were really having it hard, and when you needed an onion, you could get one next door. And some sugar, right? Cup of sugar, please. Let's go back to that. Stop worrying about where I got my shoes. Stop worrying about what kind of car I drive. Or start worrying about if I can drive. And start worrying about how can I do and what can I do to help improve the quality of life, not just in Haiti, but in the United States of America. And in closing, I have one thing. I have to say this. Africa is a continent made up of 50-some nations with 50-some different groups of people in each country with a different culture, language, etc. When you talk about Africa, don't get it confused. If you go on to West Africa, name those countries. If you meet somebody from Africa and they say, "I'm from Africa," say, "Where?" Now thank you, and thank you, the Lord.
Thank you very much. Let me see if we can maybe try for about 30 minutes. Can y'all hang for about another 30? About 30 minutes, because we've had a lot of wisdom and a lot of insight and some great points made. Let's give them another big round of applause. I appreciate it. And I'd like to invite anyone who has a comment. The mics are in the middle aisle, or a question, to just move to the mic. I'll recognize you, and If you'll be respectful and keep your comment or question to a minute so that we can get through as many people as possible. Sister, right here in the middle, you're first. Go ahead.
Hi. I just recently graduated from high school, and
That deserves an applause.
and when I was there, one of the books I read just reminded me, just came to my mind when I heard of all of your comments about Brown versus Board. Now, as I was reading this book, it's The Invisible Man, I read it and I suddenly noticed that a lot of the time what happens in our society is that we are, like, tainted glass is put over our eyes and we can't see what's really going on and what we're made to believe. Now, growing up as a black student, I mean, I grew up believing that, you know, where I was in school, you know, I was doing as well as I could possibly be doing. I mean, at home, my mom, you know, she always encouraged me to be the best I can be. And right now, I have all the intentions to become an English professor. Like, I really want to teach English so that people in our society can understand, you know, that we don't have to be tied down. We can rise up from where we are. Now, in The Invisible Man, what I noticed was that the narrator, he doesn't have a name, so I thought that was a great advice. He noticed in the story that the white people made him think that he could become something, but in all actuality, they controlled every single aspect of what he was doing. And that's happening today. When black students are given job opportunities, people never say to them, oh, you can go and be a doctor, you can be a lawyer, you can, you know, be a teacher. We don't hear that. What we hear is be a rapper, be a basketball player. I have a better chance of getting struck by lightning. I mean, what we need to do is we need to make it known to our younger children that you don't have to be what the media says you can be. Because schools aren't our only form of education. The media plays a major role. And as long as we do that, as long as we tell our children that you don't have to be famous to be important, then, you know, I think Brown versus Board will have been one of the biggest steps ever taken as far as this people.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Next, come on down. Thank you very much and good luck.
My name is Lois Numberland, and I'm also a retired school teacher. And I found out that the public school system has failed very greatly because of the fact that the teachers does not teach, most of the teachers do not teach at all, you know, and they do have, some of those schools do have material, but they just don't use the material. Well, when I was teaching, I used my material. I used on my own. When I first began to teach, listen to this. I taught the third grade. When the principal put me in a third grade class, they did not have books, nothing. The whole classroom was clean. I went out myself and bought materials for those children. They had teachers going and cutting in that class. The class was so bad. Oh, boy. I talked to them until tears were running down my chin. I said, I love you. I said, love you. I said, that's why I'm crying. I said, I want you to please stop crying. I said, listen, let's listen to me. I said, now, I'm going to be your teacher. And I said, first thing, I'm going to give you some work to do. So I want you to write an essay about me. What you think about me? That's your first essay. There were some beautiful essays about me. Then I started giving them art projects, which they loved it very, very much. And I shaped that class up to hear me. They became so sweet, so beautiful. And all of them passed the region test except for 2 people, you know. But I love teaching. I was thinking about going back again, but they told me I had to have a city license, which I'm already a current state certified teacher. And, they're trying to make changes, because they don't want the old teacher to come back. But the old teacher are some of the best teachers. And I know I'm a good teacher. I should also tell them back. But I wanted to say to all the panels, it was so beautiful. And everything, all of you said was out on the point. And I loved it. I enjoyed it, especially the preacher. I'm not like to eat. I almost like to give it a shot too. So anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you.
I enjoyed the panelist's comments about everything they said. My name is Reva Jones, and I live in Park City in the Bronx, New York. And I'm a community activist, and we're trying to do things for the children, although we need a lot more organization. And I just want to ask you about people donating their time and money, because we're developing programs, but we're looking for corporate sponsorship. And in my mind, that's not the right way to go. But how do you convince people who are organizing with you that corporate sponsorship might not, or maybe you want corporate sponsorship as the right way to go? I'd like to hear your comments, because one of the women is developing an entrepreneur program for youngsters, and she's, part of the program is looking for corporate sponsorship in order to pay salaries that, could be donated time, and pay for materials that could be donated funds or donated materials by the community. So I'd just like to hear your comments on that. Thank you.
Anyone?
I think that we have to always have a multifaceted strategy. I don't think that having corporate support in and of itself is a bad thing. I think the question is one, what sorts of conditions, if any, are attached to the funds. That needs to be one criteria to take into account, and the other is how to disperse it. So ideally, I think we want to try to really inspire people to give up their time. I think there's a whole host in terms of the entire community that we simply really don't sufficiently tap, so that you have to figure out how the expenditure in the fund that you might get that way are going to really give you the biggest bang for the buck. And paying for a salary may or may not give you the biggest bang for the buck, and then it depends upon salary for what. But I don't think that we have done this organizing work and people giving of their time, but you still need material resources even with the time. So I wouldn't diminish the need for funds.
Any other comment on that? Anyone want to add? Let me add something on that. I think one thing we need to remember when we talk about philanthropy, broadly defined, and whether it's a corporation or a foundation, in many respects, we're knocking on the doors of people we spend money with. Don't forget that. This is not a philanthropy, it's not just a gift. For corporations and others, it's also marketing and it's investing. Just look at what you brought on this trip and ask yourself where you bought it from. And I think it speaks to larger issues of how we build an economy in our community, and the proverbial necessity of us to figure out more ways to spend money with us so that we have the ability to give more back. But there's a rich and powerful tradition of giving and philanthropy in our own community. It's focused mostly on giving to churches and religious institutions, and in some cases, for those of us that have college educations, to alumni associations and alumni funds. So we need to understand that philanthropy, whether it's corporate philanthropy or individual philanthropy, is always a two-way street. And I agree with you that it's got to be multifaceted. You can do a whole lot with volunteers, but Con Edison is not going to take a volunteer check. when you try and keep the lights on in your program or your church or your business. And we have to keep some of those realities in mind as we build community organizations and as we try to build institutions, if you will, that can help ourselves. Yes.
First of all, I'd like to say I think the panel was great. I think you all brought some wonderful points to all of us. Particularly, I like the fact that it does take a village to raise a child. And that is so true. And I also agree so heartily with the fact that children and people have to love themselves and then try to spread that love to other people. My point is vouchers. I think we have a big problem with vouchers. It's supposed to help children get into a better education, into better schools. These schools are not accountable. They take up money, they're private. They are taking money away from public education. And we can't allow that because we need that money to help schools that need help with the schools that are deteriorated, with the pupils who are in large classes. There are so many things we can do to help public education, and vouchers are taking that away from that. So I'd like to have your comments on it.
Comments? Any comments?
I think that that vouchers are usually made on a state-by-state decision, and I think it sort of depends. In the end, one of the concrete examples I think about is like Milwaukee, which isn't far from Chicago, that had a voucher program. And the challenge with it was that in the end, there weren't enough spaces. First, there wasn't enough money for the parents to take, and there weren't enough places to receive the kids. And so in the end, a few kids got some benefit from the vouchers, but my problem is not with vouchers in terms of taking from public education, but that vouchers are not a solution. That is to say that not because they take from public schools, but because they can't reach enough kids. And that what we need, I think, are systematic changes that are going to meet the needs of the vast majority of children in public education. I think that nationally, in terms of the comments I was making about what's happening in Chicago, I think there are very interesting moves going on in every major urban district that has to do with a move toward various forms of privatization of public education. And some of that is good and some of that is bad. But I think the problem is that in each of these districts, we are not positioned as a community to respond in any systematic way to the various ways in which these various moves toward privatization are taking place.
I wanted to ask you.
Don't forget, there's no oversight.
I wanted to ask you about Chicago because the move to, in effect, transfer and control schools to community-based organizations. Are you saying that African-American community-based organizations are not positioned to take advantage of this new initiative?
Yes.
Not at all, or only in a small way?
In a small way. We are positioned, for example, the high school initiative that we are undertaking right now would be to form what they're calling a contact school, as a small school in what was the old Chicago High School building. But the big rollout is going to be for these 100 schools that are coming up over the next 5 years. Our position as an individual organization is that we're going to position ourselves so that we get some piece of that set of schools. But the vast majority of those schools are going to, likely, unless there's some change going on, are going to end up being run by not-for-profits that have really private businessmen, able businessmen behind those.
Is there an effort in the community to raise the issue of which nonprofits and whether the nonprofits need to have a community base if they're going to take over the school. I mean, as a part of the initiative, this nonprofit is a, you know, is a terminology, and if quote unquote certain interests are behind that nonprofit, then what have you in fact achieved? And I'm just saying, it seems like the community interest in the African American community is strong enough in Chicago, my sense, to assert that, okay, if you're going to change the control of the schools to community-based groups, that a portion of these ought to be true community-based groups with track records, roots, with boards made up of people in the community, and not, quote, outside of community-based groups or outside of nonprofits.
That's the political question that's on the table for us in Chicago right now. It's still complicated, I think, in the sense that there are boards that are positioned almost in a ground manner where you'll have some token African Americans on a board, but still fundamental decision making really is not even in their hands. So that's really
some work to do.
a lot of
Folks, there's a lot of folk who want to comment. We're going to have to get out of this room in about 10 minutes, unfortunately, and then there's also the religious service coming up. What I'd like to do, and I don't want to disappoint anyone, is just ask if we can have 3 more very, very quick comments or questions to a minute. And since we're all going to be together for the entire week, I want to encourage that this conversation continue informally and in other groups, because it's important and it's been good. So with your indulgence, we'd like to just take the next 3, and then I'm going to have to cut it off, and we're going to have to invite Ron up for some announcements and then adjourn. So please accept my apologies. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I am very pleased to say that among the things that you emphasize as a panel is a need for appropriate norms and mores and a look back to some of the things which were emphasized before. I'm Pat Sloan. I'm a public health nurse at Chicago State University now. And one of the things that we have is a new institute for HIV/AIDS public policy and research. And a recent experience of one of my students who was in education, he went to South Africa and was an exchange student and teaching in the elementary schools. And the kids asked him to explain some of the lyrics of the rap stuff that they didn't fully understand. We need to change the mores. We need to change the media and what they're saying. That recent graduate was saying that we don't have to become what the media tells us, but we also have to change what's out there, because our international image is tarnished by what has become popular. That's all I'll say.
Thank you for your comment. Thank you for your comment. Next. Yes.
Hi, I would like to say that I appreciate everything that all of you said. And I can remember so much of my mother and my grandmother that said similar, and that it paved my way in life as a minister and as a social worker in Oakland, California, where there is a high range of infant mortality rate there, as well as many women that are in drug and rehab programs. Leaves a lot of children that are left out there in foster care. And I really liked what you said about the rites of passage. Of course, rites of passage has been a part of our culture, but I don't think that we've done it in a way of excellence. And I really would like an opportunity to speak to you about that if possible. I see that we can't leave out the moms and the dads that are attached to these children, because if they aren't given the support and the education that they need, the work that we do as mentors, as teachers, and as ministers and social workers in the community will not do any good. So I would like to be able to speak to you if possible about that.
Our panelists will be available. Thank you for your comment. And this will be our final comment Last one.
Hi, my name is Marsha McBroom Small, and I was born and raised in New York City in the public school system. And I want to thank, first of all, everybody on the panel. You all said brilliant things, and I really would like us all to spend the rest of our week interacting with each other on these topics, because even this event, it would have been wonderful if we had more young people here, because we have to pass the gauntlet on to the next generation. And what I would like to say, though, quickly, is that where I was raised in the Bronx, I was usually the only African-American child in my class. I was raised basically with Caucasian students. So, but thank God, my parents gave me a sense of who I was. So I was the one who had to hold the fort in terms of our culture, our history, our heritage. I've grown up now, and now I'm a teacher in a high school, and I teach 11th and 12th grade. And it's amazing because half of the time in the class is getting the students to love themselves. They have such low self-esteem that a classroom is empty, and our children will automatically go to the back of the class in an empty room. And I told them, someone should really do an incredible study. Why is it that my African American and Latino students go to the back in an empty room? The Chinese, the Caucasians, the others are right up front under my desk. And so we start discussing these things. The whole thing of this N-word, that we as adults have to speak up. We can't sit there and just, cower in our seats and afraid of our own children. And I think that's part of the problem. I had a beautiful experience in my own neighborhood the other day. A grown man used the N-word, and one of the children said, "Don't do that. Don't you see Mr. McBroom is there? No, that's the wrong thing to do." And he said, "My bad, thank you, son." So, this is the thing, each one reach one, each one teach one. What Dr. Sanford was saying, as boring as it may be, we have to be at those meetings. Because the decisions are being made about our communities and our lives, and if we're not sitting there to speak up, things will happen that we're not going to be very happy about. But since we're not there, it will happen. Very quickly, I have to tell you this one thing. The man, I'm sure you all remember years ago, there was a